How lovely to be here. I can't really see you. I'm going to have to put my hand up like that. It's so nice to be here. It's so nice to be doing something that isn't down in the south. So nice to be up here, despite the fact that it was quite a tricky journey, but I'll tell you about that later. So I am Diane Danzebrink. I'm the founder of Menopause Support and the national Make Menopause Matter campaign. And I thought I'd start by telling you how I get to stand here, how all of this started for me. And about 10 years ago, I had to have a total hysterectomy. So that threw me straight into a surgical menopause. And until, probably a few days before my surgery, I'd never heard the term surgical menopause. And I was 45. And the reason that I had to have my surgery is because it was suspected that I had ovarian cancer. But for years and years before that, I'd had really heavy periods and lots of abdominal pain and back pain. And on one or two occasions, I tried to raise it with doctors and basically been told, well, it's normal, go away, get on with it. And on one interesting occasion, when it was a weekend, so for anybody who's ever experienced very severe abdominal pain on a regular basis, you'll know that it gets to be really debilitating. And on one weekend, I was curled up on the sofa, knees under my chin, and I was in so much pain that my husband called an out-of-hours GP. And she came and she stood over me, I'm curled up on the sofa, and she said, well, you're not in enough pain for it. You're not in enough pain for it to be appendicitis. So if it gets worse, I suggest you call an ambulance. So I suppose I kind of should have thought actually women's health is not particularly well supported as the years went on. So I got to this point in my life where I was going to be having this surgery, and because it was being done for an emergency reason, it all happened sort of very quickly. And I knew that I would be in menopause, but the only things I knew about menopause were that it was hot flushes, no more periods, and I'd only ever heard scary stuff about the thing called HRT. So I had my surgery. The gynecologist came to see me the next morning, and she said, it was a much longer, more complicated surgery than I thought it was going to be, because once I got in there, you had really severe endometriosis, and you had something called adenomyosis, and you had a massive fibroid, and you had these complex cysts on both your ovaries. So all of that pain and all of that heavy bleeding, it wasn't just normal. Actually, there was a reason for it. So if you or somebody you know is experiencing lots and lots of abdominal pain, or you're experiencing lots and lots of heavy bleeding, please just don't think it's normal. Please keep going back and getting it checked out. So I was really keen to leave the hospital. I really didn't want to be there very long. And within about 48 hours, I had left the hospital. And I left the hospital with absolutely no information about surgical menopause or menopause. I got no information beforehand, before my surgery. So I went off just thinking, okay, well, I will put my feet up. I was really fortunate. It was the London Olympics around the time that I went home, so I got to sit and watch that for two weeks. And I thought, okay, well, I'll look after my nutrition. Eventually, I'll gradually get back to doing some exercise. And they said to me, do you know what? If you think you need to, after a few weeks, go and see your GP. And I did have to see the GP because I didn't get a follow-up appointment with the gynecologist. So the GP actually had to take my stitches out from my abdominal surgery. And when I saw the GP, she mentioned HRT to me. But because I'd heard all the scary stuff about HRT, I just said, and I'd heard, I'd heard the stuff about, HRT and breast cancer. This is 10 years ago, so I'd heard the stuff about HRT and how it was made and being animal-derived and etc. That's not the case now for the vast majority, by the way. So that had really put me off. And I said, no, thank you. And the conversation didn't go any further. And I left the building. And for about 3 months, I thought, do you know what? I am having a few hot flushes, but I'm doing all right. I'm really not doing too badly at all. And then about month 4, I fell off a cliff. But I didn't fall off a cliff physically. It wasn't physical symptoms. It was psychological symptoms. I developed really crushing anxiety. My sleep completely fell apart. I got to the stage where I was having panic attacks. And I'm starting to think to myself, what on earth is going on with me? I was doing really well. Why is this happening to me? And you know what it's like to be sleep deprived and to be anxious. It just keeps going. And it got to the point where I was so anxious that actually I'd had to stop working again. And my husband and my mum said, please go back and see the doctor. But by this time, I was in such a state that I was convinced that I was going mad. And so I wouldn't go back. I was becoming more and more irrational. And as the weeks turned into months, it got to the point where not only had I stopped working, but one of my favourite things to do every day is to walk my dogs. And I didn't want to do that either. I didn't even want to leave the house. And as ridiculous as this might sound to you, I even stopped answering the telephone because I'd completely lost my confidence and didn't want to talk to anybody other than either my husband or my mum. And I wouldn't even open the post that came through the door because in my irrational head, I thought everything was going to be negative. And I had no reason to feel like that at all. And the pleas with me to go back and see a doctor kept going, and I kept refusing because I was becoming more and more irrational. And then one morning, I woke from another very broken night's sleep and got up, and in my bedroom were 2 big windows, and I remember looking out of the window and thinking how dark the world felt and how it had really encroached on me. And I remember thinking, if this is my life, this is about 8 months after my surgery, if this is my life, I don't think I can do this anymore. And later that day, a little dog called Henry saved my life. When I told my husband what I'd almost done, he immediately, without telling me, did contact a doctor. And later that evening, I sat in front of her, and to give you an idea of what I looked like, has anybody ever seen the film Truly, Madly, Deeply? Yes? Yes, no? Hands up. Yeah, okay. With the magnificent Juliet Stevenson, weeping, sobbing, snot, the whole lot. That was me sitting in front of the doctor, weeping, sobbing, when she asked me what had been happening for me, how things were for me. And I explained to her what had been going on for me. And she said, it's okay. I know what's going on. I understand, and I'm going to explain it to you. And she was the first person that had taken the time to explain that having my ovaries removed had had a huge effect on my estrogen level, and that for some people, and I want to be really clear that this is not for everybody, even in surgical menopause, for some people, that can have a significant effect on their mental and emotional health. And that's what had happened to me. And she said, it's all right, there's something I can do about it. And then she said, I can give you some HRT. And I was like, oh no, I've heard all about that stuff and it's scary and I know how it's made. And she was like, no, it's fine. Let me talk to you about it. You don't have to have a tablet, you can have a patch, you can have a gel, you can have a spray. It goes through your skin. It's no longer mainly animal derived. It's synthesized from a plant source. And in that moment, I had this huge amount of relief that not only was I not going mad, but that somebody could explain to me what was happening. And she didn't insist that I started HRT, but she strongly recommended. And I did start that day. And again, I want to be really clear, it wasn't a miracle, it wasn't an overnight success. You see on social media a lot, people talking about, oh, it's a miracle, it works overnight. No, it's not, no, it doesn't. It's treatment, and it's all about getting the right one for the right person and titrating it up gradually. But once I had that treatment, the dark, scary world that I was living in started to feel a bit brighter. There was sort of a chink of light, and the chink of light got bigger. But as the chink of light got bigger, the relief that I felt turned into anger. Because I thought, what about all the people that have gone before me who didn't have the right information and the right support at the right time? What about the people who didn't have a Henry dog? I wonder if there are other people out there struggling. And I began to search. And I did what we all do. I turned to the internet and started searching. And I was horrified because I was finding chat rooms with hundreds of people in saying things like, I don't recognize myself anymore, I don't feel like me anymore, I'm really struggling at work, I feel like I'm going mad. That really resonated with me. And the more I researched, the more incredulous I became that how could it possibly be that there were so many people struggling with, okay, not, few people are going to go through surgical menopause, but every woman is going to experience menopause at some point in her life. And then it made me think, well, actually, I didn't learn anything about it, and I didn't get told anything about it at the right time. So maybe that's happening to everybody else. And I remember on one occasion reading a comment from a man which said, can somebody please help me? I think my wife's going mad. And it was about 2:00 in the morning, and it made me look at my own husband and think, my goodness, what has this poor man been through? Because he wasn't educated about it either. He knew nothing about it. And he'd had to take on all of the responsibilities of everything that we would normally share because of the way that I had been. And on one particular occasion, a few weeks after I'd seen the doctor, I remember turning to my husband and saying, how the hell can this be right? We're half of the population, and yet nobody ever gets any information about this. If I ever feel like me again, I'm going to make damn sure I do something to change this. And that was sort of the point where I knew that I was back. And that was a huge turning point for me, because that essentially was the moment that has changed the course of my life. I never expected to be an activist. I never expected to be a campaigner. I never expected to lead a purpose over profit organisation. None of those things were in my plan. But when you realise the injustice that is being done, not just to half of the population, but actually to all of the population, because whilst menopause affects half of the population directly, it will at some point in their lives affect the other half too, even if they don't know it yet. So there will be, for everybody who's going to experience it directly, they will have contact, they might have a partner, they have friends, family members, colleagues. All of those individuals, they need to understand it too. Because if we don't understand something, we can't support it. You can't possibly be supportive to something that you don't understand. So the more research I started to do, the more I started to find that there were really common themes coming through all of the time. And what I decided to do, so my background is in therapy, I decided that I would do some professional nurse training in menopause, I'd combine the two, and I would start to counsel women individually. It took me 2 years, but in 2015, I first spoke about my own experience on national TV to start raising awareness about this. And from that moment on, I don't know how people get your email address, but my inbox started to fill up with people sharing their own experiences. And it becomes quite overwhelming. When it's just you, it becomes quite overwhelming when you're getting hundreds of emails a week from people saying, oh my goodness, I really resonate with what you said. This is me, what can I do? How can I get help? I'm really struggling to get the right help. And what became really clear is that the things that people were really struggling with was, why did nobody ever teach me about this? Why don't I know anything about this? Why can't I get the right help from my doctor, even if I go to see them? And I'm not being supported in the workplace. And I started to hear from more and more women who were either thinking about leaving their jobs or they actually had already left their jobs. And that made me think about the potential impacts. So we know 1 in 4 will experience almost no symptoms at all. 3 out of 4 will experience symptoms, and 1 in 4 will experience what they describe as debilitating symptoms. So why are we letting people get to a stage where they're experiencing debilitating symptoms? Why are we not giving them the right education and information and then saying to them, these are all of the management options out there, and it's very much about informed choice. There is no one size fits all. Why aren't we doing that? So for me, things seemed really simple. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to have greater public education. We need to be educating our young people much earlier. We need to be providing our healthcare professionals with the education that they deserve, because by not doing that, we're not just doing an enormous disservice to half of the population, but we're also doing an enormous disservice to our healthcare professionals, because we're not giving them the right tools to do the job with. And then we need to ensure that those employers, those many hundreds of thousands of employers, we need to make sure that they understand it too, so that they can support their teams so that they're retaining their talent. Now, I don't know. For me, that all really felt like common sense. And I thought, well, this is simple. Okay, we'll start a campaign. So in 2018, I launched the Make Menopause Matter campaign. In 2015, I'd launched Menopause Support, and what we do there is we share lots of resources, lots of factual, evidence-based information. We provide support for individuals, we provide education for businesses and organisations, etc. But I really felt that we needed a campaign that focused on menopause and talked about why it was so important. So I went to Parliament and I launched the campaign in October 2018 with very clear aims. And the clear aims still are, to have mandatory menopause training for all GPs and medical students, to have menopause education on the curriculum in schools, to have guidance and awareness, so some kind of formal guidance and awareness for all employers, so that all employees feel supported, and for whoever the government are, to launch a national menopause public health campaign so that we're educating everybody. And I thought, do you know what? If we get a few thousand signatures and, a bit of traction on this, that'll be amazing. And I'm really delighted to tell you that as of September 2020, we've already achieved, with 188,000 signatures so far, we've already achieved having menopause included in the school curriculum in England. And that will be down to some of you in the room too, because if you've raised your voice and you've signed and shared the campaign, that is your achievement too. So we've achieved that in England. We really want to see it throughout the whole of the UK. We have achieved the aim of having medical students being taught about menopause from next year. So from 2024, every medical student who goes through medical school will now learn about menopause. And that's the first time in history. There's still a huge amount of work to do around educating all of our GPs. And what I have learnt is what I think is simple and common sense when it comes to working with national stakeholders is not the case. Trying to get them around the table at the same time, for me, it would be one meeting. Okay, this is common sense, let's do it. I launched the campaign in 2018, we're now in 2023. There is work to do. I have learnt to be patient. But of course, in the workplace, we're seeing amazing things happen because there are lots of employers now who have recognised that we have lost really valuable talent in the past. And that I would like to see it not be down to the bottom line, not down to pounds and pence, but I'm also a realist. And I know that if they're going to look at why they should support menopause, they're going to be looking at, okay, we don't want to have to spend the money to replace that fabulous person, so much better that we support them at the right time. There is good work going on. Unfortunately, we could be a lot further than we are. I'm sure some of you saw the press recently around the government's decision not to support what the Women Inequalities Committee had put forward. They'd put 12 suggestions forward for women in the workplace, and one of those suggestions was to make menopause a protected characteristic under the 2010 Equality Act. My personal opinion is that it was a huge own goal not to do that, because we already have pregnancy and maternity as a protected characteristic under the 2010 Equality Act, so it would make absolute common sense for something that is going to happen to every female also to be in that act. And I think the point that they missed is that had they have done that, that wouldn't have just sent reverberations around the UK. They would have sent a message to the world that menopause matters, but they didn't do it. So we're moving in the right direction. There are definitely conversations going on in Parliament about having this national public health campaign for menopause. So we're moving in the right direction. And coming here this morning, so I live near Banbury in Oxfordshire, so it was quite a long train journey and it involved 3 trains. And coming here this morning has really given me 3.5 hours to reflect on the last few years. And when you book your trains, you will all know that if you're making connections, you have X amount of time to make those connections. So for me, I had around 12 and 11 minutes to make my connections, which is kind of just about doable in my head, particularly if they're changing platforms. And when I was on the first train this morning, I got a message via my Trainline app to tell me that the train I was on was now delayed, and I would have 3 minutes at Birmingham to get my next train. And initially, I thought, oh, that is not an easy place to get through. And I thought, oh, well, it is what it is. I'm sure I'll get round it somehow or another. I did get that second train, because I'm here. The second to the third train, a lorry apparently had hit a bridge, so that slowed us down by 8 minutes. So I jumped onto the train that I thought was going to bring me here and said to the lady opposite me, is this going to where I need to go? And she was like, yep, you're fine, don't worry. But what it's made me think is, you know, menopause has a really negative narrative, I think. And that is because historically, essentially, women's health has been ignored. And thankfully, this generation of women are not allowing that to stand anymore. They are standing up and saying, nope, we will not have it. Actually, our health care needs to be improved, and it needs to be improved now, not in another 10 or 20 years' time. And I think what sort of struck me today is it does have a really negative narrative, but I think that this generation is starting to change that. And I often, when I speak to particularly businesses and organisations, I will talk about the opportunity of menopause. And I'll be really honest with you, if somebody had said opportunity to me 10 years ago, if I'd have had the energy, I'd have punched them. Because where I was did not feel like an opportunity. But it definitely is an opportunity, but I can only say that now that I've had the right help and support, and I'm in the privileged position of now being able to support other people. But it is a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity to prioritise you, to think about how you can best look after yourself, how you can optimise your nutrition, your movement, how you can look at managing your stress levels. But it's also a brilliant opportunity to go, actually, what experience and wisdom have I brought with me that I can use for the future? How can I share that? How can I best share that amongst my community? So it is a fabulous opportunity, but it's only an opportunity that people can take if they have the right education, information, guidance, and support at the right time. So going back to my train journey, I actually text a colleague and my husband to say, this is what's happened with the trains. Can you imagine what meltdown I would have been in even 9 years ago? 9 years ago, it took me a couple of years to really feel like me. But 9 years ago, if that had happened to me, I suspect I probably would have cried because I was still in a pretty tricky place. Today, I looked at it and went, stuff happens. We'll get round it. It'll be fine. And I think the thing that I really want to leave you with is that menopause can be an amazing opportunity. And don't believe anybody that says that post-menopause, it's all downhill. Because I'm here to say it definitely isn't. I'm doing things now that I never in a million years expected to be doing. And I really want for all of you, for you to have that opportunity too. And I'm absolutely determined, hopefully with your help, so please go and sign and share the Make Menopause Matter campaign petition today. Share it with all your friends and your colleagues and your family. You'll find it on the Menopause Support website. I am absolutely 100% determined that we together will be the generation to make menopause matter. Thank you very much.